Hey, how you doing, Doc? Man, with my insurance and the way it's set up, it took so long for us to meet. I started providing my own therapy. Being real with you, I never thought I would have to see a therapist. Like, I didn't even really know what that entailed. I thought I would actually come in here and have to sit on the couch or something like they used to show on TV, dealing with the reason why I wrote what I wrote. It caused me to have a mental health breakdown. What happened? Well,
what happened to me? She knocked my phone out my hand. She calling me a nigga. Y'all gonna let this happen? Shoot, give me your name.
My wife and I were going out to an outdoor festival last July 2016, right before we were getting ready to go back to work. And while trying to play this game, a white woman began to call us the N-word because we grabbed a part of the game we thought she was done with. And she calls us the N-word repeatedly, and then she spits on us while her black friends are right there in our presence defending her. I posted it online, began to advocate for justice, but I don't think I had any idea during that process how much I was damaged and hurt because I went back to work right in an environment where I was a minority. Not just that, but like I felt the microaggressions at a higher level at that point. I was woke and I felt like I needed to do more. But a few weeks ago, man, before I came here, I was driving to work one day and something came over me, just all the emotions, all the frustration, the depression, the anxiety, and I just started crying, man.
In March of 2017, I had a nervous breakdown while driving to work as a teacher. It was 7 months after a hate crime that changed my life. A video of my wife and I being called the N-word and spat on in Chicago went viral.
So if I hit her, what happens to me? She knocked my phone out my hand. She called name too. Give me your name.
It was viewed over 25 million times. And I didn't feel protected as a black male teacher among mostly white staff. I pulled over to call my mom in tears. She recommended I call off and see a therapist, but I couldn't find a black one that would serve me. So I turned to something that had always been my refuge, writing. And I realized that the hate crime was a part of a lifetime of enduring racism, yet combating it with pride through black historical teachings. For me, writing in black history saved my life.
When it happened, I realized at that moment that I needed help, but also too, I realized what people meant when they said they had a nervous breakdown or a mental health breakdown. I was stuck. But then I realized how difficult it was to find a therapist in this country, even with, having health insurance with my job. So because I couldn't access a person like you immediately, I had to provide my own therapy, my own catharsis. I started writing. I always wanted to write a book anyway, but I never thought it would be something that was directly about an experience I had with racism. I thought it would be about other people, Doc. It made me realize that incident, that hate crime, that wasn't the first time I dealt with racism. That's not the first time anybody who's black deals with racism. It made me reflect a lot. It's not right to, you got younger kids, man, even at the time of this meeting, man, you got kids across the country, kids in our community that have to deal with racism at such a young age. And nobody should have to deal with it, Doc, but it made me think about the time I was 6, and it wasn't directed towards me exactly, but my mom felt it. When you have a white teacher calling home every day at this school that you're being bused to, telling your mom how bad you are because she doesn't know how to teach you. And it makes you wonder, does she view my white friends the same way? Are they viewed as bad, or are they viewed as just active? Are they viewed as leaders? If I didn't have parents who defended me in situations like that, I don't think I would have the resiliency I have now, but that resiliency comes at a cost, because we all eventually, reach our point, our breaking point. Dealing with something like that, man, since you asked, right, it made me think about the time around that same age, 6, 7 or so, something like that. I was in class innocently coloring a picture of Santa Claus. And for me, everything in my house looked like me. So it made sense at that age, I'm believing in Santa, that Santa Claus would be black too. He would have brown skin. Coloring Santa Claus, brown skin, and then one of my closest friends, this white kid, comes up to me and he's like, "What are you doing? Santa Claus is white." We're 7 years old. How does that even come to your mind and to be How are you even that audacious, Doc? You know, even though I was young, these things, they leave a scar. It make you think of the world in a different way. Because even then it made me feel like, well, is there something wrong with the way I'm presenting how I truly am? You know, truthfully, man, like when people see viral videos like that, they usually think that's the instant where we deal with the harm. But even beyond that, I was again bused to this neighborhood, this school. It's a good school academically, but 25 years prior to when I started going there, you had a white community of parents who violently protested against black children coming there. 1968, y'all, this is 14 years or so after the Brown versus Board of Education decision. So it was a hostile environment still, because you think 25 years later, those people are still there when I started going. I didn't feel that type of racism or hatred from friends I had that were white. And now, of course, again, I had some of those microaggressions, but it just helps you realize even more that we're taught to be certain ways. We're socialized to be certain ways. And then the thing that always got me, Doc, is, you know, after school, all my black friends, we're getting on the bus. And as we're on the bus and we get in our seats and we're pulling down the window, we notice that all of our white friends are walking home. Why ain't they getting on the bus? Don't they live far away like we do? Start to learn about the system. And I always tell people, like, you know, all of us should have access to you. And you shouldn't have to go through all these hoops, because many of us are born into systems of racism like that. I was born in a segregated community that was that way, that the resources were taken away intentionally. So now I'm trying to figure out how to process it, right? Because it all came to a head on that day. But I've been talking a lot. Let me be quiet for a second. How did those incidents make me feel? It made me feel like something was wrong with me, if I'm being honest. It made me feel like something was wrong with all of us, because it's not always what they explicitly said, right? The teachers or my friends, but again, how we were treated, what we saw being bussed away. So we are feeling in hindsight. It made me feel like an outsider, but also I felt a strong sense of pride, because think about what my parents provided me with to counter that. Because the instances where I felt like something was wrong or like an outsider were honestly far and few between, because I was taught so much about who I was, being immersed in an environment at home where blackness was everything. It was everywhere. The art we had, the pictures, the church environment we went to. And I think I was taught to be resilient with that, like to see how my mom stood up for me, to see the words of wisdom my dad gave me, even in my neighborhood, like my sister, like 4 years older, always defending and stepping up for me. And I'll never forget, like, my parents were pretty candid about some of these things. Again, I was a child, but most of these incidents, I wasn't even 10 yet. I remember growing up, again, far south side of Chicago, we didn't have a lot of restaurants just in our neighborhood like that. I lived in the food apartheid, right? When I would see commercials, places like Denny's or IHOP and stuff like that, I wanted to go. Like, they make that food look real good, man.
Denny's asked America what they wanted for breakfast.
I want it fast, but I don't want a donut. I want a real breakfast.
The whole 9 yards.
Omelets, French toast. I love French toast.
I want the bacon crispy and the toast to melt my butter. That's the way I like it.
Don't make it ahead of time. Cook it fresh or don't cook it at all.
They do that at Denny's.
America, there's a hot home-cooked breakfast second to none and served 24 hours a day, only at Denny's.
Is that too much to ask?
And it's not like we had Uber Eats, right? So I remember asking my mom one time, hey, can we go? Can we go to Denny's? Can we, let's go to this place and I want to enjoy some of this breakfast I'm seeing on TV. Like the way they make the pancakes look and all of that. That's before I realized how much they spend to make the food look a certain way. Yeah, my mom was very direct. My parents were very direct. Said we couldn't go. And usually I can understand why, even at that age, but I had to really ask why, because the way she said it was just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I think that's one of the things that has kept me going so much too throughout life, is my willingness to ask why. To be genuinely curious and to never accept the way things are when there is inequity. Mom said it was because they didn't serve black people. Now that just didn't sound right to me because I didn't have the language for segregation, the language for Jim Crow stuff, but I knew we weren't living through the same thing that Dr. King stood up against. And she explained to me that oftentimes black folks will go in there and would be forced to wait longer to be seated. Like you might go in there, it's a family of 4, and you tell the waiter or waitress, they party of 4, non-smoking section, because of course back then you could smoke inside, right, in these restaurants. And they would say, okay, it's a 15-minute wait. You could have a white family come in, same background, 4 people, non-smoking, and they would get seated immediately. So many people, in fact, brought that up and brought attention to it that there was a class action lawsuit. Denny's had to pay millions of dollars for that, right? And even for me now, many years later, never went. It was almost like we had a family protest of Denny's, and I don't know how many other black families grew up in the 90s knowing this, if they weren't directly impacted by it, but that said something to me. It didn't make me feel bad, because even when these things happen, it always feels strange to me that somebody would treat you differently because of your skin color, because of how they feel about your skin color. So it made me feel like if somebody doesn't treat you right, you refuse that because you deserve better.
So I'm right outside of Costco for the first time ever, and you know why I'm here. Target recently rolled back their DEI commitment, and during that same time, Costco said, nah, bruh, we ain't gonna let Trump scare us. We're committed to this.
And I guess what I'm getting at, Doc, is like, even in this moment, I know I deserve better. I know we deserve better, but sometimes it's a heavy burden to bear. Well, I mean, when you asked about high school was different. High school was different because not only was I older, but I went to a majority black high school. So I was with my community, not just in my neighborhood, but at school. One of the things that really stood out to me when we talk about dealing with racism, man, like the school was majority black, but the content wasn't. Content that we were taught, the topics in history, topics in English class weren't relevant to who we were and our as people. You discuss world history, you don't see yourself in the picture. You don't enter that space until slavery, colonialism. That was tough to wrap my mind around at the time. If I don't see myself in this information, in this content, when I know I should be there, it makes you feel invisible. And for black kids, like in these environments, like we're majority black schools and high poverty neighborhoods, I mean, we have to be able to see ourselves in a positive light to want to do better. It didn't make it any better, when we started driving, because then you start driving, you have to have the talk.
The talk to me is the conversation that we have with our boys, particularly black boys, about how to have interactions with the police.
They're to understand that the police aren't necessarily there to protect and serve them, but perhaps they're to profile them, perhaps they're to just make judgments about what they may be doing, even if they're not doing anything.
Further explaining, how it's important for them to just get home with us. And so we want them to understand how they should behave and understand that it's a pervasive issue in our society today, that it's quite possible that that interaction could go very wrong.
It also includes instructions as to what you should do when you're stopped.
Put your hands on the steering wheel. Make sure the lights are on.
Don't do anything without police permission. Ask before you get your registration. Ask for a supervisor if you feel like things are starting to escalate.
There is a line of questioning that goes too far. If they feel uncomfortable with those questions, they need to say, you know what? I want my parents to be in the room.
It's part of driving. It's just part of, driving while black. And it's literally like just how you explain how to parallel park, you explain this is what happens when you get stopped.
I'm not sure if you can relate to that, but you have to have that talk with your parents. My dad gave me the talk, and just realizing the responsibility and the risk that comes with driving as a young black man. And it should really just be about just regular car safety, right? Wearing your seatbelt, using your turning signal, all of that. But it becomes a conversation where you realize that if you don't respond a certain way, if and when you get pulled over, your life could be at risk. Safety is on the line. And I mean, I started driving, getting my license at 16, get pulled over like a few months after that. It hit me hard, going like 7 miles over the speed limit. I'll never forget the time me and my friends were driving back from playing basketball in Chicago, by the University of Chicago, in fact, and we were pulled over because we fit the profile. That's exactly what the cop said, we fit the profile. They didn't find anything. So again, like, they weren't calling me the N-word right with this when they erased me and my friends from the content. The cop wasn't calling us that word or spitting on us when we got pulled over, but that's what it felt like. We were 16, 17, 18 years old. How do you tell a group of kids that they fit the profile for what? Like, young men who wanted to play basketball? I mean, it's crazy because like this is before we all had cell phones, so our parents thought we were just playing for a long time. We were on the side of that road for like 2 hours, 3 hours. Unbelievable. And I just always think, like, going back to the conversation my dad had with me, he said, you almost should never really drive in the car with you and your friends if it's outside of just one additional friend without an adult, because they'll pull you over. And he also talked about how I should be aware of the friends I'm allowing in the car, because if they have something on them, that's me too, right? Luckily that day we did it. And we have to look through it through a lens of, I survived, right? That shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be the case. What I started to realize through this whole experience and ordeal, and even reflecting the last few weeks before we met, is not just the racial trauma I've dealt with throughout my life and the systems that impact us, but I truly began to realize that to this point, Black history saved my life.
There's nothing wrong with us. Something happened to us. I need us to truly understand that. When you study our history, and I travel around the country and I speak and I go to a city where we are, all I have to do is put in red line city, map, and it never fails. Every city I've realized had the same program as Chicago. So it wasn't just where we are, it's everywhere across this country, not just in the so-called North, but in the South too. Everywhere we were, a plan was instituted to hold us back. So again, how can we say our condition is our fault? Nothing's wrong with us. Something happened to us. We have to always keep that in mind. So those days where we see stories that are very disturbing and we just don't understand how it could happen, we have to truly understand that that's what the system does.
And to be more specific, it's knowing and discovering who I truly am and who we truly are, and understanding the degree to which people have fought, to literally fought and risk their life to keep us in bondage and imprisoned in our mind. You know, like, we know that Black folks were fighting for our freedom in the Civil War, but there were also white folks who fought to keep us enslaved. Like, that's a strong commitment to hate. So when you ask what keeps me going, is self-discovery. Because yeah, we didn't learn about who we were in those high school history classes, but I was able to find out about the richness of our culture in Africa prior to enslavement, that we emerged from people who created great civilizations in East Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, to Mansa Musa in Mali.
Mansa Musa, revered as one of Africa's most illustrious rulers, ascended to the throne of Mali in the early 14th century. Renowned not only for his political acumen, but also for his vast wealth, Mansa Musa's reign left an indelible mark on history. Under his leadership, Mali flourished, becoming one of the wealthiest and most powerful empires in the world. Mansa Musa's legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 showcased the immense wealth of his empire, as he distributed gold generously along his route, inadvertently causing economic disruption in regions he passed through. his legacy extends beyond material wealth. He fostered cultural exchange, promoted education, and facilitated the spread of Islam throughout West Africa, cementing his place as a towering figure in African history.
To the contributions we made to mathematics and astronomy, to the fact that the university in Timbuktu was the epicenter of learning. Like our number one resource, the thing that was most valuable to us was knowledge. Hundreds and thousands of manuscripts in West Africa, in Timbuktu, in Mali, dedicated to scholarship and learning. When I learned about great people like Ahmed Baba, who was a great teacher at that time, you think about these great people who built the walls of Benin. It helps you understand that that's who we are. That's who I truly am. So when I say like it saved my life, and I, begin to even teach people how we can save theirs, it's restoring our memory. Doc, I started to figure out that we were victims of like historical amnesia. It's almost like, it reminds me of the Men in Black scene when they come up with the little shiny pen with the red dot, to the people who saw an alien and they press the button and the memory's gone. That's what has been done to us over the course of time. But when we remember, when we discover that memory of those aliens, it empowers us. Because I say this knowledge saved me because it reminds you and tells you that you're not the lie that so-called white supremacy purports. You're not the lie that is proliferated through these systems, through these ads, through these movies, through this content. You are the truth of what has been done before and what's being done now. We always resisted our treatment. That's what keeps me going. When you find out about people like Robert Smalls, who steals a Confederate ship, rescues his family, recruits for the Civil War, becomes a congressman, advocates for universal public education, after being born enslaved, then buys the property that he was enslaved on. What excuse can I have in 2017?
Have you heard the story of the black slave who stole a Confederate ship and sailed to freedom? As a youth, Robert Smalls had mastered Charleston Harbor, working as a skilled rigger and ship pilot. He gained the trust of the ship's white officers, so much that they often left him in charge overnight. In 1862, disguised as the captain, he navigated the ship past 5 Confederate forts, giving the correct signals at each checkpoint. He picked up his wife, children, and other escapees before sailing toward the Union fleet, raising a white sheet in surrender. At 23, Smalls became a national hero, and his fascinating life story had just begun.
He was born enslaved. My wife and I would call the N-word a spat on. It's perspective. And I'm in a time now, where I can actually fight for justice in it. There was a time when you just had to deal with it. So yeah, going to court in the midst of this and having this whole case in limbo is stressful. Having to go to work in this environment is stressful. But reading about my history and learning more has given me peace. Starting to write this book has given me peace. It keeps me going because even when I tell you about the Denny's story, for every situation with Denny's, yeah, there was a Victor Hugo Green who provided a green book during Jim Crow so that we could know where we can go safely. And a variety of Black-owned businesses were around too that provided access for us. And it's also important for us to realize that, yeah, there were people who did not look like us who fought for us too. There were white folks who fought against racism because they understood that it was a system set on a bed of lies, that it shouldn't exist. People like Ann McCartney Braden.
Yo, who is this white woman with Rosa Parks? That's Ann McCartney Braden, a white woman from the South who helped organize white Southerners to join the Civil Rights Movement. Ann was born to a racist family in the 1920s in Louisville, Kentucky. However, she always knew something was wrong about it, especially because her family was very religious and what they engaged in seemed very hypocritical to her. But she didn't fully commit until she went to college in Lynchburg, Virginia, ironically. As she got older, she would campaign for progressive presidential candidates and also get involved in desegregation protests. But in 1954, her life changed forever. She was approached by a black couple she knew, the Wade family. They wanted to buy a home in a suburban neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky following World War II, but they couldn't because it was in a white neighborhood. So to help out, Ann and her husband Carl bought the house in their name. This purchase took place 2 days before the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which was supposed to desegregate schools. Unsurprisingly, when the white folks in that neighborhood found out a black family lived there, they would burn crosses in the neighborhood and dynamite the home when they were gone. In the 1950s and 60s, Ann and her husband were two of the most hated white folks in the South, period. And you know why. This woman worked closely with Rosa Parks, the very underrated Ella Baker, and Dr. King mentioned her in his letter from a Birmingham jail. And she campaigned for Jesse Jackson in the 80s. So for my white supporters, I know you're anti-racist, but are you on Ann's level with it?
Who fought against housing discrimination, who helped organize white Southerners in the civil rights era, who advocated with Rosa Parks, folks in the present day who opened my mind like Tim Wise about the lies of racism and how it was set up to divide and conquer. Those are the things we have to know, because even to that person who assaulted me and my wife, if she was taught those things, I highly doubt she would have done what she did. I don't think it would have happened. It makes me think, like, a couple months ago, I started speaking to audiences about this stuff, and it really puts it in perspective how important it is. Because, you know, Frederick Douglass once said that knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. And I would even also say that knowledge makes a man refuse to even want to enslave someone. I'm gonna keep reading. There's so much more to discover, and I'm gonna keep writing. I got a lot to get out. It's definitely gonna be a book one day. Thanks for your time. You have a good day.